I never thought I'd be back in this city. It had been years since I walked these streets, and coming back felt like stepping into a ghost town filled with memories I didn't want to revisit. But life had a way of pulling you back to the places you thought you'd left behind. I had been running for too long. Running from my past, my mistakes, and most of all from the person I used to be. But after my dad passed away, there was no more running. I came back to sell the house to close this chapter for good. And that's when I met Adrian. I had stopped by the local bar trying to drink away the weight of the day. It was late and the place was nearly empty, just a few people sitting quietly nursing their drinks. I found a seat at the counter, ordered a whiskey, and tried to forget everything. That's when I noticed him. Adrian sat a few seats down, staring at his drink like it held the answers to everything. His dark hair was a mess and his shirt looked like it had seen better days. He had the kind of look that told you he was carrying his own weight of the world. I knew that look because I'd seen it in the mirror too many times. We didn't speak at first. I wasn't there to make friends, and he didn't seem like he was either. But then, as I took another sip of whiskey, he glanced over. "You look like you've had a day," he said, his voice rough but kind. I chuckled, setting my glass down. "That obvious, huh?" He shrugged, turning his drink in his hand. "Yeah. Same here." That was how it started. To strangers, sitting in the quiet of a bar, both running from something. I didn't know what Adrian's story was, and he didn't ask for mine. But over the next few days we kept finding ourselves at the same bar at the same time. Each time, we'd talk a little more. He told me he had been living in the city for years, but life hadn't turned out the way he planned. Work was falling apart, his relationship had ended months ago, and he didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I told him about my dad, about how I hadn't spoken to him in years, and now that he was gone, I didn't know how to feel. Somehow, we found a strange comfort in each other. It wasn't friendship, not yet. It was two people trying to hold on to something, anything, as the world around them crumbled. One night, after a particularly long conversation, Adrian walked me to my car. We stood there for a minute, the cool night air between us, neither of us wanting to leave. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something beyond the pain. "Do you ever feel like you're drowning?" I asked quietly, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded, his dark eyes meeting mine. "Every day." We stood there in the silence for what felt like forever. Then, without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like the lifeline we both needed. From that moment, everything changed. We started spending more time together, not just in the bar but walking around the city, talking about everything. We didn't always have the answers, but being with Adrian made me feel like maybe I didn't need them. Maybe, for the first time, I didn't have to run anymore. One evening, as we sat by the river watching the sunset, Adrian turned to me, his expression serious. "I don't know what I'd be doing right now if I hadn't met you," he said, his voice soft. I smiled, though there was a heaviness in my chest. "Same here." Adrian looked down, playing with a small rock in his hands. "I'm still figuring things out. Still don't have it all together." "Neither do I," I replied, leaning back on the bench. "But that's okay. We're getting through it." He nodded, and for a moment it felt like we had finally found some kind of peace. But the truth was, we were still broken, both of us. We just happened to find each other in the middle of the storm. A few weeks later, after another long night of talking, Adrian looked at me, a different kind of look in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice uncertain, "about us." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the tension build between us. I had been thinking about it, to wondering if this was more than just two lost souls leaning on each other. Wondering if we could be something more. "What about us?" I asked, my voice just as shaky as his. He hesitated for a second, then moved closer, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said softly, feeling my own walls crumble. "I'm not going anywhere." Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, and without another word he closed the distance between us. His lips met mine, and in that moment, it felt like everything had fallen into place. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty, it all melted away, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel alone. We were two broken men, saving each other piece by piece. And maybe, just maybe, we could build something beautiful out of the wreckage.